in this verse, certain groups are mentioned, certain vulnerable groups, the orphans and the poor. But actually, in our society, there are different vulnerable groups. There are new vulnerable groups in society, so we have to make sure that we take care of those people. Not just the ones that are listed. That isn't an exhaustive list. It's just giving us an indication of look after the vulnerable, those people who can't help themselves, vulnerable people in society, and that is part of your religion. That is an act of worship. And the last one I've put there is arrogance and self-conceit, where you're attributing superiority, greatness to yourself on the basis of the group that you belong to. So rather than saying, okay, let's look at the evidence, let's look at the arguments, say no, because I'm saying it, it has to be the best argument there is. Because I'm saying it has to be true and you're wrong. Yeah, because we have this superior intelligence. Yeah, we've got this massive tradition. Yeah, look at all our works and commentaries and upon commentaries. Right? So this arrogance and self-conceit, where you attribute superiority to yourself solely on the basis of the group that you belong to. Okay? And then I think that is something that you find in the context of sectarianism, where everybody is a victim of this. The reason why one group will attack another group is because they believe they alone have the monopoly over truth. And there's this arrogance. It won't come across as arrogance, they might dress very humbly, but actually it's this intellectual arrogance, this religious arrogance, saying that we alone are true, and our interpretation, our opinion, has to be imposed on everybody else. Yeah? Otherwise, everybody, so we alone are the real believers, everybody else is out of this. And I think that's the real core of many of the problems we see around the world today, this arrogance and self-conceit. Rather than saying, okay, let's have a look at the evidence and then apply that to decide what the outcome is, we're driven purely on personalities, on groups, on belonging. Okay, just going to pick up on a couple of the language aspects of the verses we read. At the end of this verse, it says, ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. So God lists the contract. Okay, we said the contract was worship God, be kind to your parents, orphans, and so on. And then at the end it says, ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ. Then you turned away. And it uses a verb. And the reason it does that is because in Arabic, a verb is transitory. It's not it might be you've done it once or twice. It's not a permanent feature. And then it follows, straight after it says, وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. And then you are turning away. It uses the noun, makes it more permanent. Okay. So, and the reason for this is that you can't accuse people of being wrong if they've only made one or two mistakes, unless it's become a core part of their habits and a core part of their lifestyle. And so, this verse first uses the verb that you turned away, and then it says you are the turners away. وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. So it uses the verb to indicate temporary action and then permanence. And the phrase is speak kindly to people. Now have a look at this. It's addressing a specific group of people. It doesn't say speak kindly to other people who are Jews or other Muslims. Speak kindly to your family only. Speak kindly to those who are kind to you. It just says general. Speak kindly to mankind. Good amongst them and the bad amongst them. Everybody. I know it's easy to speak kindly to those people who are kind to you, but it's much harder to speak kindly to those who are rude to you. And the phrasing is beautiful. قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ husna. Without any qualification, without any narrowing, universal. Speak kindly to everybody, the good and the bad. Everybody. And you know, because it's very easy to speak kindly, speak nicely to those who are nice to you. But the real test, the real challenge, is when somebody's shouting abuse at you, and whether you speak kindly back to them. So the wording is quite interesting. It says, so speak unto everybody, all religions, all groups, irrespective of who you're talking to, is the social status of people. It doesn't matter. You speak nicely and beautifully to everybody. Okay. the use of the second person pronoun. This probably won't make sense until let me take you back to the translation. Okay, we took a pledge from you, do not shed one another's blood, or drive one another. Actually, in the Arabic, it says don't drive yourselves, anfusakum. It uses the second person pronoun, you, as though when you're killing yourself. If you're driving somebody out, you're driving yourself out. It doesn't use one another, it says anfusakum, yourselves. So, وَإِذَا أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ لَا تَسْفِكُونَ دِمَاءَكُمْ وَلَا تُخْرِجُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't take yourselves out. And the interesting thing here is, from the language point of view, God is hinting at us and telling us, actually, that if you kill somebody, you're actually killing yourself. If you're doing harm to somebody, you're harming yourself. So therefore, that second person pronoun is used to say, don't do this to yourselves. Even though you're not killing yourself, you're killing somebody else. But the wording that is used is saying, don't kill yourselves. Because if you kill somebody else or you harm somebody else, in effect, you're harming yourself. Okay, so it's a very subtle point there. And the last language feature I want to pick out is the word anfusakum. In Arabic, anfusakum means yourselves. And the word anfus, the plural of nafas, comes from the word nafasa. And nafasa is used for things that are really extremely precious, valuable things you really cherish. And it's used for life, for self, for others. And it's because the most precious thing that we have, the thing that we cherish the most, is life. So therefore, the word for precious, for valuing, has been used to describe life itself, the word nafas itself. And that's it's telling us that actually you value the most important, the most precious thing is life, human life. And so the word itself, in Arabic linguistically, means a precious, nafis object. Okay, just sticking with this theme. He says, don't harm yourselves, don't kill yourselves. And this can mean two things. One, where you're harming other people, but also yourself as well. So linguistically, it can also apply to yourself. So, for example, you're not allowed to kill yourself in terms of suicide, or harm yourself, or create hardship for yourself. And I thought I'd share with you an example from the Prophet ﷺ. There's a group of people, a group of 10 people, and one of them was this man called Usman bin Ma'az. He was a companion, may Allah be pleased with him, and he made a pledge. He said, from this day on, I'm not going to wear any nice fine clothes, as a typo there. I'm not going to wear any nice, I'm going to wear rags, the worst clothes. And I'm going to leave my home, I'm just going to go wander in the desert. I'm not going to come home to sleep in my comfortable home, I'm just going to wander around the desert. And I'm not going to keep the company of my wife either. And I'm not going to eat any more meat. So basically I'm going to live a very humble, very frugal life. The Prophet heard about this. And he went to his house. And he couldn't find him, obviously he was probably somewhere in the desert. He couldn't find him, he wasn't at home. But his wife was there. And he said to his wife, have you heard? Is this right what I hear about your husband? And she said, if you heard this, then it's true. You have heard. And then the Prophet said, tell him this, that it is my sunnah, it is my practice to wear good clothes. It is my practice to spend time with my wife and wives. It is my practice to wear fine clothes and eat meat. If he turns away from my sunnah, he's not from me. Okay, very interesting. You know, this is not, the concept of worship in Islam isn't that you abandon life, that you create hardship and difficulty for yourself. No. You can live a comfortable life as long as you maintain that connection with God. And as long as that concept of ihsan, you see the perpetual presence of God everywhere, because that will transform it. Yeah? God has no need for us to dress like beggars and wander in the desert. There's no need for that. But God looks at our hearts. Our hearts connected to Him. And is that belief then driving us to make the world a better place? Okay. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a moment. I'm going to open it to some questions and answers. But before I do, I'm going to give you a summary of the rest of the verses. I realize I've only done 2 verses. So I'm just going to give you a summary so what happened. God's reminded the rabbis of the pledge. Okay? And then they broke the pledge. They broke the pledge. And not only that, they started being aggressive towards each other. You know, their own family members, their own relatives, their own tribes. And God is telling them, how can you claim to be pious people when you can't even treat your own people nicely? Yeah. And the next couple of verses, they talk about the tribes of the Jewish tribes. There was 3 Jewish tribes at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Banu Qaynaqa, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza. And they were big Jewish tribes. Yet, they would make alliances with other tribes, with the Aus and the Hazraj, and fight against each other. Yeah, they'd kill each other, take their wealth away, banish them, put them into exile. But when their family members were captured and somebody asked for ransom money, they would go and pay the ransom money because they said the Torah, our holy book, says we must pay the ransom money. And then God tells them, you know, what kind of religion is this? You are told not to kill each other. You are told not to harm each other. Yet you do all of this, and then you pick out that one ritual aspect of your religion and say, we're doing this. You know? And so what they would do is they would attack, capture, kill their own brothers and sisters out of loyalty to the tribes that they were with, not to the commandments of the Torah. And then when it came to showing one aspect of their religion, which was a big idea in their religious law, was that if one of your family members or members of your tribe is captured, you must pay the ransom money. So they themselves would drive them out and then pay the ransom money to get them back. Okay? So if you keep that in mind, let's look at the translation. Next couple of verses. It says, "Yet here you are, killing one another and driving some of your own people from their homes, helping one another in sin and aggression against them. If they come to you as captives, you still pay to set them free, although you had no right to drive them out. So, do you believe in some parts of the scripture and not in others? The punishment for those of you who do this will be nothing but disgrace in this life. And on the day of resurrection, they will be condemned to the harshest torment. God is not unaware of what you do." Okay, key message from there is that how can you claim to be religious if you don't follow the values of your religion, but you just follow the rituals of your religion? So quick. Okay. There's always negative aspects of human nature. You know, we all know that. There's, you know, human beings can be pleasant, but also they have a darker side. And especially, you know, when you're in close proximity to people, those darker elements come out with those who are closest to you. And that's why this pledge was to be kind to each other. Because it's easy to be kind to strangers, it's much harder to be kind to each other. And especially people who are in close proximity. And it requires greater self-restraint. Because, you know, it's natural. You will always get annoyed or irritated by people who are close to you. So therefore, the test of your faith is this: how you treat those who are close to you. Because religion can't exist without this moral basis. If you have religion without this moral basis, you have nothing but a recipe for disaster. And you can't pick and choose. You follow part of the book which says pay the ransom money, but you don't follow the big part which says treat each other well. And all you're doing, the reason why they did this, let me just add this point. The reason why they did this is because they wanted to show the public that look how pious we are willing to give so much money to release the captives because we are fulfilling our religious duty. It was a show, just to show this. It was a hypocrisy really, just to show how pious they were. And God is telling them actually that doesn't show anything if you haven't got the core moral basis of your religion right in the first place. So lessons for life. Let's practice the values of religion. So the externals have to be connected with the values of religion, which is compassion towards each other. And complete acceptance. You can't take one part and reject the other part. And try extra hard to show forbearance and kindness towards your family, friends, co-religionists, etc. And this will only happen if you have sincerity towards God first. Okay, you've got to know that actually one day you will go back to Him. If your religion is only for you, just an outward thing, that will not lead to any change in your behavior. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to open it up to questions and answers. Feel free you can have comments. I don't mind being challenged, they're just my views, my opinions, but I'm happy for people to engage with what we've talked about and have a discussion. So if you want a few moments to reflect, then I'll take any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a question. One of the things you mentioned was in the translation was towards others, being kind to others.
Yeah.
But I think your translation was what that meant was people close to you. Maybe.
Okay, let me just go back. Was it the first set of verses?
That's fine.
That one. Yeah.
Yeah, parents and
kinsfolk. Yeah.
But weren't the Arabs, the Jahili Arabs, like famous? My understanding was they were famous at that time, before even Islam, for being kind towards strangers and hospitable. Weren't they famous for that? So was that one of their good points? And I'm wondering why that point was made to, in the message to them.
Very interesting. And actually the answer is there in what you just said. They were well renowned for their loyalty to others. But if you look at how much infighting there was between them, they would have wars that would last for decades over tiny little things between each other. And the word in Arabic, if I show you the Arabic, it just makes it clear. It says, Dhil Qurba. Qurba is people are close to you, Qareeb, and in Arabic it's referring to your family. And if you look at the Arabs, even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the amount of wars that the Quraysh had within themselves, within the different clans within the same tribe. So that's a very interesting point, that yes, they were known for their loyalty, but they were also known for fighting with each other all the time. And it's reminding them actually start off first of all with your parents, because if you can show kindness to your parents, that will extend usually to everybody else in the next level of existence. So yeah, very good point. Yes.
I think just a small comment regarding this question. He mentioned about Arab of Jahiliyyah, that they were very kind and compassionate and very generous people. But here, this Surah Baqarah, which is second chapter of Quran, that is basically directed to Jews. So here, basically, Jews are directed, Bani Israel, children of Bani Israel. And they were very sort of intriguing, conspiring amongst each other, and they had a lot of issues.
No, that's...
So this is being addressed mainly to Jews.
It's very interesting, because if you read further on in Surah Baqarah, where it describes what is piety, it says, Laysa al-birra, what is bir? And when it gives the list, it says, Laysa al-birra an tawallu wujuhakum, it is not piety that you turn to the east or the west. But what is bir? That you be kind to those who are close to you. And it mentions the same phrase again when it's directing the Arabs as well. I think this is human nature. Human nature is that you always have fallouts with your family. Always have fallouts with people who are close to you. And therefore, the reminder has to be there that actually, that there's no point telling people to do something that they find easy. There's no point. But the point is, remind you of the things that are difficult for you. And what is difficult for us is dealing with people who you meet on a daily basis, people who are close to you. And you can see this, all around the world. Some of if there is no cohesion within a family, that family cannot move on. And this is the key point where God's emphasizing this point that actually you will find it easy with strangers, because He hasn't actually mentioned strangers here, apart from strangers who are poor. But everywhere else, this phrase Zil Qurba is mentioned when it's talking to the Jews and Christians, but also when the Muslims are being addressed as well. And I think in a nutshell, basically, it's because that is the hardest to do, really. It's harder to be kind to each other once you've had fallouts. Yeah, and how you patch up and amend, and that requires more effort than strangers who you only meet every now and again. Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, anybody else? Anybody from the sister side?
I would just like to say one thing. And if you look back in history, every single religion has had infighting, and it's still going on now. And if people don't connect the spiritual to the material, then it's going to carry on. And if people don't change their attitudes within themselves, it's just going to...
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at sectarianism, people who are fighting with each other, the dispute is always about outward. The disagreements are nobody argues about the core, the basic fundamental values. Nobody's going to argue that we should be kind to each other. The disagreements always arise over tiny, minute little items, and then they define that sect or that group. And many years ago, I studied comparative religion, and I was really fascinated to find that most religions have a very simple, basic core. And yet, and even within that religion, those people who have the disputes and the arguments, they're about very petty little things, outward external things. And you can see that amongst the Muslims as well. If you look at all the groups, that in terms of the core matters, there's total agreement, and then the arguments come over matters which are peripheral. And yet we define them as core matters, and therefore that happens. And I completely concur with what you said. If you don't connect the spirituality to your outward faith, then you're just going to get a religion which is not really religion, it's more like a political movement just to promote your group rather than promote goodness. Because the whole point of religion, as we've seen just in these few verses, is you are a force for good. And if you're not a force for good, if your religion is causing destruction, then that is not religion in the eyes of God. Or in the eyes of the Quran, really, it's not religion, because you should be a force for good. Okay, Jazakallah. Okay, I think that is time for Salat al-Maghrib, and we'll just finish off with the Asr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal Asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. By time, mankind is in loss, except those who believe, or those who do good actions, those who encourage each other on truth, and those who encourage each other to remain steadfast. Okay,